is now available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Six Bayonets, comrades, this is Chief Guard of the Republic Radio Show with your co-hosts Paul Burvitt and Mike Tuman every Saturday noon to 1, except today it's noon to 2. We got to fill in until the White Sox come on. And WRMN 1410 AM, Fox River Valley Media Network, streaming on WRMN1410.com. Just go to that webpage there and hit the listen live, and you could just listen in. Then you could also watch us on the YouTube channel, WRMN 1410's YouTube live channel, which we will be on right now. Or you call in at 847-931-1410. You could text us at the magic New Mexico number, 505-926-1410, and hit us up in the comments on the YouTube live. All right, so let me get this shout out there because I promised the boys at Dunkin' Donuts Veterans I would do it. So every Tuesday, if you're a veteran or you have something associated with a veteran or you just want to sit in and visit us, every Tuesday morning in Niles at 7039 West Dempster, just east of Harlem, from 9 o'clock to about 10:30. I don't think we've ever went later than 10:30 unless we've had some big speakers there. It's the Dunkin' Donuts Veterans. You don't have to join. You don't have to pay any money. You don't have to give your name on a list. But if you're a new guy, you come in and you could say the Pledge of Allegiance in front of lead everyone in the Pledge of Allegiance and tell us your story, and we'll give you a big welcome home. The other thing, another guy passed on for me. I guess he's from the Rotary Club, but this is to support something called the Honor Flight. Maybe people have heard about it, but Wednesday was the 120th Honor Flight from Chicago, the Chicago Honor Flight. These are all over the country, and shout out to Cleveland Dennis, because it was actually, though, Columbus, Ohio, that started this, where they would take veterans and fly them to the District of Columbia and take them on a tour of the war memorials. And it's really good. They really treat these guys real well. My cousin asked me to go along as like his assistant, and I had to go to training for that. And I went, and it was a very unique experience, and these veterans really liked it. So they're asking for, they said that they're 2 years out. It's almost 2.5 years out. So if you apply to go now, and they're taking everyone Vietnam era and before. If you apply to go now, you probably won't see a seat on one of the aircraft for 2.5 years. However, if you are a Korean War era or a World War II era veteran, then they will put you on a seat right away. They'll bump someone, put you on a seat right away to get out there. And you don't have to be a combat veteran. You don't even have to be gone overseas. All you have to be is a veteran. That includes the Vietnam era veterans. So anyone that didn't go to Vietnam or maybe went to Germany during that time, or even Korea, you can still apply for it. But for you guys, it'll probably take 2.5 years to get on that. For Chicago, I hear that Milwaukee is a little easier. Lake County, there's some other ones, but it was a good time. It's well worth it. It's a charitable organization. You could find the link to it. You should. No, I haven't put the link up on my webpage yet. All right, so I got that out of the way. And Paul, I want to talk about today, and it really, my brain starts ticking on this stuff, the firing or retiring of senior officers or officers in the military by the president, because it just came out in the press, and it's like a big thing. And I'm like, oh, a colonel got relieved. Oh, no. That's an 06. The officer ranks go from 01 to 010. And the second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, and then boom, you got the 7 right there, a colonel, a full board colonel. Then you have 08, which is a brigadier general, 09, which is a lieutenant general, is a major general. 09 is a major general. 010 is a brigadier general. Maybe I'm losing count. 7, 8, 9, 10 is a lieutenant general, and 011 is a 4-star general. 012, I guess, would be the 5-star, but we have not seen a 5-star since Omar Bradley. All right, so when you're talking about the grand scheme of things, 07 isn't really high up, but it is a rather high rank. All right, it's called a senior field grade. You have company grade, field grade, senior field grade, then flag officers. All right, so the colonel, you have to make colonel before you pretty much make flag officer, except in the Guard. All right, so this the Space Command colonel, commander of a base, Space Command base in Greenland, got relieved for cause. And the press seems to be all in a big whippy-do about it.
Well, before we get into that, though, I'd like to say something. Next week is actually next Saturday is a very important day, and it's the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the American Revolution with the battle at Lexington and Concord. And I think that's important to remember in light of our topic today, because the military has been the backbone and the protector of our nation now since actually before our independence. And people forget about that. So April the 19th, 1775, the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. And another important aspect is it's 151 years or so, 151 years since the basically the Civil War. So next week is an important time to remember. But you are exactly correct. You know, it's interesting, though, because by my count recently, there's been 12 of these. And she's just the last one. But the information that the press is putting out there relates back to a speech she gave on, listen to this, Women's Equality Day in 2015.
Well, that's what the press is saying. But what it really comes back to is an email that she sent out across the whole base through the U.S. military's email system to everyone on the base. And I didn't exactly read it. I don't need to. It's just that she does not agree with President Trump, and she let everyone know that. And I'll discuss why that is an extremely bad thing to do.
Right. And so she's just the last of about 12. And what the military is saying, which is their catch-all, is due to a loss of confidence in the ability to perform leadership duties. And that's exactly what ties into the email. Because and I think yesterday there was the command for the base securities, both the officer, the commander, and also the command master chief were both relieved of duties, and they've been in their positions for less than a year. And then you have this Colonel Susanna Mayer. And then you have, about a week ago, the Vice Admiral Shona Chesterfield from NATO. And then in the recent past, there's been the Admiral Linda Fagan, the Commandant of the Coast Guard. Then you had the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown. Then you had Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the Chief of Naval Operations. Then you had General James Sleef, the Vice Chief of Staff for the Air Force. Then you have Lieutenant General Joseph B. Berger III, the Judge Advocate General of the Army. And then you have the Lieutenant General Charles Plummer, the Judge Advocate General of the Air Force.
Let's not forget the Joint Chief of Staff, General C.Q. Brown.
Yeah, I mentioned him. And then you have Lieutenant General Jennifer Short, who was the senior military assistant to the Secretary of Defense. Then you have General Timothy Hogue, H-A-U-G-H, Director of National Security and the Cyber Command. So you have, it's about 12. since the last few months.
You know what I have to say to that? That's a drop in the bucket. Every change of regime reviews officers to see if they're going to carry out their policies. Because the last thing you need is to be carrying out policy and then have one of your senior military officers stop that and make problems for you and slow everything down. I think we've seen that with the judicial system, which is a separate branch. And the reason this is important is because the military doesn't fall under the judicial branch. It doesn't fall under Congress, although Congress has supervisory authority over it, especially when it comes to the promotion of these generals. Not the assignment of them, but the promotion of them. From colonel to general, that takes an act of Congress. All right? Except when it comes to the National Guard. That's kind of a little different story there, but to be federally recognized, it's going to come to an act of Congress on that. So the basic statement to understand is that people think military are decision makers. They are only decision makers in the absence of orders. So as a military person, you take orders. When you don't have any orders to follow and you need to take action, then you make a decision. Until then, you take orders, you follow your orders. You don't make decisions on your own that I'm not going to follow that order from above because you swore, all right, an oath saying you will follow all the legal orders of those appointed above you. And to even say that you're not going to do it or delay it is honestly, that's reason to be brought up on charges, I think. And just to be relieved of command is a nice way of doing that. And they could do it all sorts of ways. We know, I think two of the most famous generals to get relieved of their commands and big command, right, by presidents, you go back to Abraham Lincoln, beginning of the Civil War, right? And for over a year, he had a General McClellan, who was a young guy, and honestly, he did very well in bringing the Northern Army up to strength and up to fighting thing. But then he stopped. He stopped for whatever reason, and he started getting he started butting heads with President Lincoln, who was, from what I understand, the study in history, was very hands-on and extremely involved in the war. He was issuing orders directly from, and McClellan wasn't following those orders or wasn't following as quickly as Abraham Lincoln wanted, so he relieved him and replaced him with General Burnside. All right. Now, the other one, we go back to, we weren't even at war. We were at conflict in Korea. So Korean War, all right, so it wasn't declared. But we had a 5-star general back then, and his name was MacArthur. And we're in the Korean War, and he starts butting heads with President Truman over policy. President Truman didn't tell him how to fight the war, but there's policies involved. And he butted heads with President Truman, and it was pretty public. He got relieved by President Truman. Fired him on the spot, which is his authority to do. No one can stop him. No one can stop the president from firing any general. Period. All right? They all work for him. That's why we have a civilian-led military. So then, all right, MacArthur comes back, gets a welcome home and everything. So this has happened, all right? And I think people have forgotten that other things have happened during other regimes. I don't know why you call it regime. Is there a better word than regime? Because regime sounds kind of bad. Words have meaning, words have connotations. But McChrystal, remember McChrystal? Stanley McChrystal? He was fired by Obama, and that was pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal, And here, what was it over? His disagreement with President Obama's policies. Right? He has no word in that. He's a general. He follows orders. There's someone above him that gives the orders, and if he doesn't follow them, if he's trying to make his own policy, that's not his job. That's not the way our military works. So You go up, of course, Miley retires before he gets fired. That was pretty good. And then they just quickly threw that General C.Q. Brown in his place, in Miley's place. Right? And let's go back further here, a little further, with one of the Desert Storm's heroes back in the 90s, Norman Schwarzkopf. And this wasn't really publicized, but you have to infer this. You have to know a little bit about what happened to him. Right? So he just creams the Iraqi army, just pounds them senseless. He's the commander of CENTCOM, Central Command, which has Iraq. It used to have everything in the Middle East except for Israel. Israel fell under European command, but now it's under CENTCOM. Right? So he used to have command of all that. And he just stomps the Iraqi army, kicks them out of Kuwait, kicks them halfway back to Baghdad. And when it's over, when the fighting has settled down, he's doing a press conference and he's asked a question. All right, and this is how sensitive policy versus military is. And he's asked a question. Why didn't you go into Baghdad? Right? And he said, that wasn't my decision. And he came home to Heroes Welcome, and then he was offered the Joint Chief of Staff, not Joint Chief of Staff, the Army Chief of Staff position, which if anyone that's been to the War College knows, that's a demotion. So he was a combatant commander, one of the very few combatant commanders, and he answered directly to the Secretary of Defense. Now, you might say, oh, wait, Joint Chief of Staff. Nope. That Joint Chief of Staff is up there in an advisory position. He answered directly to the Secretary of Defense, who answers directly to the President. He is one step away, well, 2 steps away from the President of the United States when it comes to military actions. So what he should have said was, that was not the mission. That was not my decision, because that implies that he disagreed with that decision not to go to Baghdad. Because the war wasn't to topple Saddam Hussein. The war was to liberate Kuwait. There you go, all right? So he took a demotion, and he didn't take the demotion. He refused to take the demotion and retired. So it's like, they did it in a nicer way, because he was a political, like MacArthur, all right? He was a political hot potato at the time, because he had just won a glorious victory. And to fire him after he won a glorious victory is something. So now we have these officers here, and unfortunately, our system for the previous 4 years skipped 4 years, which is a hiccup, right? And then the previous 8 years, these officers had come up under a different type of a system, all right? They saw things, they didn't disagree with policy, because they absolutely agreed with the policy of the regime at the time. Now the policy has changed. In some ways, it's changed drastically. And they feel that, how to explain that? You know how Snowden finds stuff that's illegal, right? And then he leaks it to the press, and then he flees to Russia, right? Well, they want their Snowden moment. They want to be seen as, oh, this person, they're so brave. They're so, they took it to themselves to go up against the president. I'm like, well, no, they're not really brave, because they just flat out violated their oath. Flat out did it. And caused trouble and dissension amongst, that could be considered, okay, it's not sabotage.
Insubordination.
Not insubordination, sedition.
Oh.
That can be considered sedition, because they're causing the troops to be demoralized or to have conflicts on the policy that they're supposed to carry out and enforce. That's why we have a State Department. That's why we have the president, all right? So the State Department goes in there internationally and does things, and then the president sets policy on that. When he sets that policy, his enforcing arm What are you going to do? Send in a bunch of Peace Corps people to enforce it? No, you got the military, the U.S. military, grandest military in the world, to enforce the president's international policy. Enforce it, not question it. You're only allowed to question an illegal order, and you better be really sure that order is absolutely illegal before you don't obey it. So what do you think, Paul?
I agree with you. I agree. Their job is not to question the administration, and what they're doing is they're trying to, without saying it, they're trying to point a light on another area, saying that would be where I would go, but without actually saying it, or in the case of the one woman, possibly saying it in an email. But they should speak with one voice, because that's what they're supposed to do, and only say what they should be saying and not give their opinion in what they're saying.
Yeah, and we're, when we deploy now, after the McChrystal fiasco, right? We had to go through additional 4 hours of training on how to talk to the press. Here's how you talk to the press. You don't. You talk to the press. You go, "Hi, Ma." Hey, I want to say hello to everyone back home. You don't. You don't carry out policy. You don't tell them how you feel about the policy. Anything. That's not your place. You're taking the man's coin. You signed the paper. You got sworn in. No one was drafted. No one was drafted. All right. Is there anyone left in the Army that had been drafted into Vietnam as late as 1972? So that would be 38 years of service at 18 years old. So that's 50. That's 56 plus 25 years. They'd be 81 years old. 81 years old is a no.
Yeah, you're about right.
25 plus 56. Yeah, 81. This is 2025. That's how old they would be. At 18 years old, drafted in Vietnam, 28, 18, my bad, 46, 71 years old. They would be at least 71 years old. So I don't think any draftees are still in the military at that level, and they could have got out after 2 years. No one kept them no one kept them past the 2 years. So all volunteers. All right, so we're going to head to a break here, and we got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. All right, so when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about with Norman Schwarzkopf, not with Norman Schwarzkopf, or about his situation, so you understand that even if he was assigned if people think that the chief of staff of the Army, who works for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is like, he's one step away from the Joint Chief of Staff. But I want to explain to you why that isn't true, because are you a paper tiger or are you a combatant, right? And
his father, I think, was one of the heads of the New Jersey State Police, and he was involved in the Lindbergh kidnapping case, I believe.
Oh, that was brutal.
Yeah.
I haven't done any research on that, whether that was where they actually got the right people. You think they actually got the right people?
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Sometimes if you're an eyewitness to it and you say, yeah, that guy did it, yeah, you could be sure. But all right, off we go. We'll see you back in a couple minutes after these fine announcements. Okay, Fixed Bandits, brothers and sisters, we're back for another half hour of this 2-hour day, so we're a quarter way through. And a shout out to Cleveland Dennis. Yes, Cleveland Dennis, the Iraqi army was pretty not what they were all cracked up to be in Desert Storm in 1990. However, you need to talk to the Marines that fought for fought against the Republican Guard for the Kuwaiti airfield, the airport there. All right, so the Republican Guard was hardcore and did stand and fight. It was pretty brutal. All right, so Brendan, hi, how you doing? Glad to see you're listening out there. And all about the ladder for Lindbergh, but that's kind of a little off subject. So what I was talking about is there are 4-star major commands, and they're not all equal. You have combatant commands and you have functional commands, all right? So the main combatant commands, all right, are Africa Command, which is a newest one, and it kind of got rolled into Syncland, but that's going back, all right? So Africa Command, which controls pretty much Africa, all right? Central Command, which is the Middle East and Southwest Asia, all right? Then you have European Command, which is Europe and Greenland and Iceland fall under that, along with, like I said before, they used to have Israel, but now that's gone back to Central Command, all right? Then you have the Indo-Pacific Command, formerly known as PACOM, just Pacific Command, but they have like everything else, Southeast Asia, Australia, and Antarctica. That's what I think I just found out, because we got Little America and Antarctica there. And then right before, you have Southern Command, which is everything south of Mexico. So in the Americas, so South America and parts of Central America. So Panama falls under Southern Command. In fact, Southern Command used to be headquartered in Panama. Now they're headquartered in Florida because we kind of left Panama, but that's a topic we talked about before, and we may be talking about it again. And then you have the second newest command, NORTHCOM. Before, we didn't have a command over the United States. We just had, you know, like the National Guard, and we had STRATCOM and stuff like that. But not, they codified it and made it into NORTHCOM, which is commanded by a National Guard officer. All right, so it's not a active duty command. It's the guy's on active duty, but he falls under the National Guard, and that's for Title 32 reasons. All right, so those are the combatant commands. There's other functional commands. Cyber Command is a functional command. Special Operations Command is a functional command. Space Command is a functional command. The Strategic Command is a functional command. And Transportation Command, which is a big one because it goes all over the world. Those are functional commands. They're all 4-star commands. And it's 4-star, not just Army. You know, these aren't Army commands. These are joint commands. That means any 4-star from the Navy, the Marines, the Army, or the Air Force can fill these positions. All right? The thing is that they don't hold any land. They're not defending any land. They're like in Cyber Command, they're defending virtual stuff. Space Command, it's kind of virtual again because we don't have any, you know, space stations in space to defend. We're not defending the moon from anything. All right. So when the real thing, like I said, when you're one step away from the President of the United States, you go through the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. The big one is in that combatant command. Those are the big ones you have. All right. And they are responsible for all sorts of stuff. It's like, I don't know how to describe the difference between the combatant commands and the functional commands. I mean, it's great to be in a functional command, and we look at someone like Eisenhower, who was really a staff officer, not a lot of combat experience on there, and he did a fantastic job organizing the war, which was a logistical war, you know, so you think someone from logistics command could do it. So to tell someone that, you know, we're going to reduce you down to a guy who's really, you know, not in direct command, you know, you're an administrator rather than being in command of troops. So if I'm, okay, here, if I'm Chief of Staff of the Army, I'm in charge of the Army, right? Just the Army. If I am the commander of CENTCOM, I'm in charge of all U.S. forces, all U.S. forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, SpaceCom now, and Coast Guard working under the Navy. I'm in charge of all them in my area, all of them. That's me. So I go across all these other things. All right. So to have these guys, what I was supposed to look this up and I didn't. What is it the guy on the back of the chariot was supposed to be whispering into Caesar's ear when he was
all glorious fleeting.
All glorious fleeting. All glorious fleeting. And the Romans back in the day, you couldn't bring an army crossing the Rubicon, right? You couldn't cross the Rubicon. And that became a phrase. I don't think people know what it really means. Once Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he was an enemy of the Senate. All right? He was a commanding general. He wasn't Caesar back then. His commanding general, he brought his armies past the Rubicon to enforce what he thought was a corrupt Senate to change the government, right? And crossing the Rubicon means he made the final step. It's a coup. He's an enemy of the state, right? So these officers, they're doing their crossing of the Rubicon. Once you open your mouth there, if you're forcing the hand of the regime, right? You're forcing their hand. They have to do something. If they don't do anything, it's like the president getting one of his vetoes overridden. He becomes impotent in his job. Someone else starts doing his job for him. So if you're not able to enforce discipline amongst the officers, and if an officer does something, one of the things one of the phrases I like is known or should have known. Right? If you're in a position of authority, if you're in a position of responsibility and authority, and you've been placed there, and you're well paid for it and well respected for it, you do not have the luxury of saying, well, I didn't know, because you should have known. And by saying I didn't know, you admit to fault and guilt. And we've seen it in a lot of our elected officials. They always like to have plausible deniability. Well, how was I supposed to know? I'm just the mayor of the city. Well, you're the mayor of the city, you're supposed to know. And if you don't know, you better find someone to fire for it, right? Because they didn't tell you. But nothing happened. They get, how would he know, So what do you think, Paul? You think known or should have known, it should...
Another one is we do a lot of passing the buck.
Yes.
And we don't figure out what's supposed to be done. We just delegate it. And that's bad, unless you delegate it to someone who has the same ability or concept as you, and no one really ever knows that.
So like in the military, there is a charge in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's called incompetence. Can you be charged with that in civilian life? As a criminal act.
You could be charged with something with gross negligence, which would be similar to incompetence, but it'd have to be really gross. Yeah.
So you watch Law and Order, right? This is fun. Yeah. I can predict the outcome of like every episode of Law and Order just by if the guy takes the stand or not. It's like all the writers. If the guy takes the stand in his own defense, boop, guilty. If he doesn't take the stand, it's like, oh, he'll be innocent, or he'll be a hung jury or some crap like that, right? Well, you see that, and they're always going after, they got a murder or someone dies, right? And they charge someone with murder, and then they're like, oh, well, the jury throws that out, right? Because, oh, how should he have known or something? And so they go after someone like down the chain of events, and they go, well, it was that bus driver, he was doing 31 instead of 30, so we're going to get him for gross negligence, or it always got me, because I says you never see that in courts. You never see it. You never see him go on that much of an edge. Yes, he should have known and everything, but in the military you have that option. If you get promoted into a position, you don't have the option of saying, I wasn't trained properly, all right? I didn't know what I was doing. I was too dumb, all right? And you can't allow that, so you have the charge of incompetence. So now here's your choice. If you are promoted for reasons other than qualification, pure qualification, all right? You're qualified, you can do it, all right? If you are promoted above, and they say everyone rises to their level of incompetency, right? Well, you are promoted above that, and you fail. Should you be given the option to resign, or should you be prosecuted for incompetence under the UCMJ? That's a question there, and I think when they relieve them for cause and they give them a little letter here, hey, you should really retire. You got your 20 years in. You should really go by now. And I think that's one of the things they do hold out in front of them, because we can. I don't care what you said. It falls under incompetence. Kind of a general statement, and we'll prosecute you, and then we'll dishonorably discharge you, or we'll take rank from you.
It gives them a ticket to go on and be an analyst at the cable stations that are not friendly to the government. Then,
yeah, that's
it's actually like a reference. It's a reference to certain channels. Hey, we need this guy. He was let go from them. We got to have him.
Well, that's Jim Mattis. Jim Mattis,
right?
The big Marine guy, the big Marine 4-star. In fact, there's like a law in the books that said that you can't take any public appointed office within 2 years of your retirement from the military.
Right.
So you retire from the military, you can't be appointed into any civilian job, because
right.
They didn't want people sucking up the congressman and everything else like this and jacking. But they made a big show for Mattis, and they waived that for him, and they brought him in. And I think they made the big show intentionally, right? Because I don't think he was in a very good part of Trump's original cabinet. All right, I think he butted heads a lot with him, and he replaced him shortly thereafter because of that. Right, and he goes to work for General Dynamics. Right?
It's a revolving door policy.
Yeah, I mean, hey man, if you can't steal enough when you're a general, right? Why do you need another job after you retire? I mean, it's like these guys, they just can't give it up, They just can't go in the background, like MacArthur. Well, MacArthur was what? He was really old. But what job did he have after he got relieved of his command? I think he just retired.
Didn't he go to Hawaii or something like that?
He could have, but he didn't. It's not like he got a job with Chrysler or Ford or some.
I've read some books, and I don't want to malign the guy because he did have some great service, but. One of the things he did when I think Truman got off a plane, he refused to salute him and he just shook hands with him. And that was one of the things. And then I think the other thing is they asked him, I remember reading in a book somewhere, they asked him because at that time, Eisenhower was running for president. And they asked him about that. And he goes, he was the best clerk I ever had.
Yes.
He always did stuff like that. Like he felt he was above everybody else.
Yes, that's a key here. That's one of the points I want to make. These guys get their bottoms polished so much by other people's lips, right? That they think they're they think nothing's wrong with them. That everything they say is correct and right. And oh my God, why isn't he doing it the way I say and everything? But that's not their position. You want that position, run for president. And yeah, MacArthur had a chance to run against Truman for president. He could have been a political competitor with Truman. At the time, he wasn't. But I think the main concern was MacArthur really wanted to take the war home to China. He wanted to bomb across the Yellow River, or whatever rivers, the Yellow River. He wanted to bomb the Chinese logistical points. He wanted to bomb the bridges. He wanted to really nail it, but that's Chinese property, all right? And Truman was, no, we're not getting into a incident attacking the Chinese mainland, And there was a big disagreement, and they went to meet in I believe one of the islands, could have been Hawaii. It may have been Guam, but it's one of the islands in the Pacific. And MacArthur did not want his plane to land before President Truman's. He wanted President Truman to greet him coming off the plane and not to greet President Truman coming off the plane. And there was a big thing there. And that was kind of like refusing to salute. As soon as you do that, dude, you're fired. Who's your aide? Yeah, you're in charge now. Find your own way home. Don't let that guy on a plane. But he was such a hero. I mean, he went in at Incheon and basically saved the South Korean and the American army that was there, and basically put the North Koreans and the Chinese on the run. All right, that was a big act. So he's a massive hero, because this stuff is getting radioed back and everything. Television starts coming into play. People start seeing this, and he's like a massive hero. All right. So how do you deal with them politely, where you're not having the whole public turn on you and your policies? You got to be really careful with these guys. Like I said, Schwarzkopf, big hero, didn't fire him directly, but offered him a demotion. People wouldn't see it that way. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't see it that way, right? You wouldn't see it as a demotion. It's the same pay grade, everything else, but it's not the amount of power and prestige that you're used to having, all right?
Turns out in the break, I checked, his father was a major general before him in World War II.
Yeah, and I worked for another general. I'm not going to mention his name. It was in Bosnia, and his father was a general, and this guy, although he had advisors in this field, he didn't listen to him. In fact, he kicked him out off his staff, not off his staff, but out of his tactical operations center for the division. And so he didn't listen to this guy, and he didn't research it. And no one there, very specific mission, no one there knew what it was. But he did something in violation of U.S. policy. Well, it's actually in violation of U.S. law, but it ended up being policy. And they had to reverse, they had to, backdate the approval. All right, so he did something without approval, without taking it to the higher ups. It was embarrassing, and they had to backdate the approval to not cause like serious legal complications for this guy. And he was a 2-star. That's a major general. And I always wonder why lieutenant general outranked a major general when a major outranks a lieutenant. And he's a lieutenant to a general. So he's a lieutenant, the right-hand man of the 4-star, right? So the 3 stars, the right-hand man of the 4-star. So he's a lieutenant to that guy. And a major general is above a brigadier general. So brigadier general is like a junior, and then he's like the major, So it started making sense to me. So he was retired at a 1-star. Right? Oh,
wow. Because he lost the star?
He lost the star, man. But he fell on his feet. But that was kind of embarrassing because his father was a 3-star.
Wow.
But when you get that, when you really have to, I've never been in that position where I've had that much power, control, and that many people underneath me just telling me what a great, fantastic person I was, how well I'm thinking, because they're looking for their own promotions. They're looking for their own officer evaluation reports. I've never been in that position, so I don't know how it affects your mindset. When you violate some basic doctrine that you would imagine if the 2-star, right, and they have 2 1-stars working for them, deputy commander operations and deputy commander logistics, operations and deputy commander support. So the division commander will have 2 1-stars working for him. Imagine if if the deputy commander of operations flat out refused to do something that was a legal order of the 2-star and went to the press about it.
Wow.
That 2-star would have him gone, right? What if a colonel did that? That's the end of the colonel's career. If a lieutenant did that, that's done. That guy's going to Leavenworth, all right? But they get there and they're like, well, not when I do it. I'm a general. I'm higher up. I know better. You know, and that's the arrogance. And how do you keep people from, how do you judge whether they're going to have that arrogance or not, that hubris? So, and here, really, and this is where it gets really confusing, right, to me. Do you want a general that's arrogant or a general that's way too humble when you go to war?
Well, Bradley was a humble general.
He was. He was a humble general. He was a humble general.
Patton was arrogant.
Patton was arrogant.
Right. And they were both considered to be the top, you know. So, I mean, you know, Patton's considered to be one of the best generals of all the nations.
Patton was lucky in that, not okay, smart guy and everything, but Bradley was on his staff, all right? And Patton's, again, problem was he had difficulties talking to the press. He had difficulties talking to the lower ranking troops. He thought he had the answer to everything. Okay, I got a guy with shell shock here. Oh, the doctors don't know how to fix it. I'll show you how to fix it. I'm a general. I could do it. The biggest mistake of his life, right? Biggest mistake of his life. And that caused, because he became a hot potato now, right? That caused them to put him to the side, you know, to sidebar him. He had to beg Bradley to get back into the war.
But putting him to the side actually was beneficial because they made him in charge of the paper army that the Germans were afraid of him. He was the general the Germans were afraid of, and he had them chasing their ghost for a while.
Yeah, that's true. So here's the thing. And who did that? That was Eisenhower.
Correct.
All right, so we'll be back in a few minutes after these wonderful announcements. Fixed Bayonets, brothers and sisters. Paul, we're still on, just no video. Oh, there you are. I'm not. No, you're there, but I'm not.
Hi.
All right. So,
okay, you got a test pen.
Yeah, I saw it. We got Dennis Green, Mr. Sonar himself, here with us, and he's fixing up some of the equipment, making it more beautiful. So I was going to show the books, but I can't show the books. I'm a test pattern. I'll get to that later. All right, so
are they your books?
Yeah, 2 of my books. Yeah.
Which 2?
I got Rumble and Under Platoon.
Okay.
Because we're talking about military stuff, so I thought I'd bring 2 of the military books in. And like Dennis Green, not Dennis Green, but Dennis Cleveland Dennis out there. He's, you know, we're talking about the 4th estate and how everyone has a voice. Well, surprisingly now, even in the written word, everyone has a voice because of Amazon. And I think there's other independent self-publishers out there, but the one that I've used, because once I learn how to do something, it's very difficult to retrain me. I keep doing it the same. So I had found I wanted to write a book, and I did some research, and Amazon self-publishing was out there. So I started free writing some stuff, and then I went to the Amazon, the KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, which is part of the Amazon conglomerate of, you know, corporations. And they had a simple enough explanation on how to do everything. And it didn't cost me 1 cent, not 1 penny, other than my initial investment and, of course, internet access and my internet access and the computer that I had. So I didn't even need to buy a word processor because you could go to Google, right, to Google, download Google Chrome. You could get yourself a Google account and you could use Google Docs. There we go. That's the anthology of my earlier works. So that's
an excellent book, by the way.
Yeah,
an excellent book.
If you hit someone with that, it'll hurt. And I had to knock that down to 11.5. Paul froze up there. 11.5 font to get it all into 711 pages, which is the maximum that I could do on KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. So it didn't cost me a dime. Once I got the stuff all formatted and uploaded, Amazon prints on demand. So you don't have to order 5,000 copies. You don't have to order 10,000 copies and then try to resell them, which is what a regular publisher would do. They would burn off maybe 10,000 copies, and they have the connections to take you to the stores and everything. But Amazon's the world's largest bookseller. So you put it out there. If people want to buy one of my books, there's Under Platoon. It's right up there on Amazon. 99 cents on Kindle. Or okay, they got it on Kindle Unlimited. It's free. So the paperback's only $9.99, right? $10, and the hardcover is probably around $15. So I try to keep the books low priced. I'm not making a lot of royalties on these. Right, they do take a chunk of the money, the Amazon does, because they have to make their money back. So there's a printing fee, and they take part of the royalties because they have to make a profit. But you have some. I could sell this for up to like a couple $100 per book. Teachers will do that with textbooks, right? But I'm making maybe 30 cents to $1 per book. It's not to make a lot of money. I just want to have my voice heard, and I think I got creative stories to tell, a little bit of legacy to leave, because Paul, as you advised, which was a great advice, I would get Library of Congress numbers, and my books are all in the Library of Congress. So if you get out to DC, go to Library of Congress and check them out and read them. All right. So that is what we call the citizen reporter, the citizen journalist. All right, this is maybe there's a little commentary on things that I hear about, but I'm not writing like stories of dog bites man or man bites dog, or the post office didn't deliver something. These are novels. They're fictitious. They're plausible, but they're fiction.
Minuteman journalist, Mike.
Minuteman journalist.
Like the Minutemen journalist.
So if you're going to do, if you're out there, it's harder to find somewhere where you're not being observed. And so if you're going to commit a crime, you've got better commit it where no one cares, or where you're not being observed and everything, because it's all out there. So we're almost like kind of a little bit of self-policing. And in order to compete with your average Minuteman journalist out there, all right, that's where they come into wordsmithing. Even myself, a high school graduate and a college graduate, and someone that's been through the language school for 2 separate languages, and constantly writing reports in the police department and the military, I still have I have trouble with the right words or whatever. I don't have a very large vocabulary, but I know how to look it up. You have professionals out there in the press that fearmonger, because fear is a very good motivator. It's an excellent motivator. It's better than money. All right. When it comes down to it, people offer up any amount of money that they have to keep from being tortured, hurt, killed, whatever, So fear, And that's what the press uses on people, a fear that, oh my God, look at the stock market's dropping. Yeah, that's what it does. It goes up and down. That's the stock market. You know, if it constantly went up, then it you know, you invest in how does anything work if this is constantly going up? You know, you're going to have winners and losers. Are we always going to have constant winners? Maybe not. But they want to make it look like something terrible is going to happen. Okay, let's clock back 25 and a half years. What was the big problem?
Global cooling?
Well, no, Y2K.
Oh.
Oh, the world's going to end because the computers can only understand 1999. When it goes to 2000, we're all doomed. Oh, every database is going to crash. And you know, people were like panicked and everything. People were staying up to midnight just to make sure this didn't crash and everything. It was a big nothing burger. You know, that's an army term too, nothing burger. You know, my favorite nothing burger is anything Geraldo Rivera does. He's good for spinning stuff up and everything. The
Al Capone's safe.
Al Capone's vault, yeah. You know, the southeast side, some building that was supposedly owned by Al Capone, and there's this bricked off room there.
Lexington Hotel, yes.
Yeah, no one's ever seen. And, you know, he spun it all up, and there was a couple empty beer bottles. Yay.
I think they're worth some good money, though.
Could be. You know, if you auctioned it off to the right person. Look, this was pulled out of Al Capone's vault. You know, take it to the shout out to Pawn Stars, of which one of our Post members for Post 104 American Legion has been on that show 5 times. He's a collector. He collects some stuff, and he goes out to Vegas, and you know, he offers it to them. They make him counter offer. You know, so, but yeah, you know, if you play that up, that's the thing. But it's playing everything up to get a reaction for fear. I don't think the press is okay. Thinking of it psychologically, if you were out there as the press and you said, "Oh, everything's going to be all right," you know, don't worry about it. This happens every year, like with the flu. It happens every year. Some people are weak. Some people aren't prone to surviving on this. That there might be deaths, but you know, 99.9999%, you're probably going to survive it, right? And then 99% only survive, and then the press looks, oh, well, you told us everything was going to be all right. But does anyone ever go after them when they tell them everything's going to be terrible and the world's going to be terrible and you're going to be eating cheap, not the good cat food. You're going to be eating cheap cat food the rest of your life because the stock market's crashing. And when that's totally wrong, does anyone hold them accountable?
No.
When people sold at a loss and lost a bunch of money because they heard stuff in the press and everything, that's gambling, right?
Correct.
Did they hold them accountable? Did they go to court to sue them for, you know,
No.
You see, that's where they take no risk.
Only when they malign an individual can you really go after them, and you have to be a person that's not in the public eye.
Yes, like our little guy up in Kenosha.
Right.
And who else? Oh, the smiling guy, the smiling Catholic, the Catholic group.
Yeah, at the parade or whatever, where he was like abused. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you lose the billions of dollars you got to pay off. I would like to be in the boardroom to see the board of directors going, whose life are we going to ruin because of this? You know, did you see them firing the writers on this or anything? Or saying, you know, we got sued. Now we're going to sue you to recover that money. You know, even though you're our employee. You know, so this is it. If you have something that makes you afraid, right? If you hear stuff in the press that makes you afraid, I'm not going to say it's wrong or anything, but call in with your concerns. We'll address it. I'll look it up during the week, and I'll be able to say, well, you should be afraid or you shouldn't be afraid. But by all means, use what's out there available to you. The internet, the citizen militia, the militiaman journalist. All the guys out there and everything. Let me see. Anyways, all right, so I got to publishing here. The other thing, once you publish it, you're going to, if you don't pay anyone to proofread it, like a professional proofreader, and you don't have anyone in your family that will proofread it for you, then you might find some fat fingers when you get it in print. That's okay. You could go back, fix those fat fingers, and re-upload your manuscript. And the next book they print out it'll have the new manuscript in it. So you would have fixed those fat fingers. I'm still in the process of doing that. All right. So that's how I address some of my issues with the military. All right. I didn't come out there with I'm trying to think back, because this makes you self-reflection, right? There was one time where, as a CW5, I've got the brigade commander and the MERC commander, Military Intelligence Readiness Command, commanding general. And she's a functional area commander. She's not a combatant commander, all right? Functional area. We're quote, combatant brigade, although support, because we're intelligence brigade. And the colonel was training for one mission. She wanted to push all the training for one mission that we didn't have. It wasn't our mission. And I was aware of this because of my previous tour with the previous tour at the Army staff. And I knew how things worked. One of the best courses I took, education, can help alleviate fear on stuff. Education and experience will help alleviate fear. You just become either you become used to it, or you learn that it's not really something to be afraid of. So I learned I knew what our real mission was, and I knew what it would take to change that mission, and I knew that another unit already had the mission that this colonel wanted, but she was training for the mission that she wanted rather than the one that she had. And I brought it up to the general, but this was within the brigade, right? Within a brigade thing, and just the brigade staff, not everyone. So the general, the staff, the colonel's there, and I'm there, and I says, hey, general, where are we on the list to go there? And she says, you're not. I go, well, then we ain't going. I said, we should be training for where we might go instead of for where she wants us to go. I think that's what ended my career at the brigade. But she should have known that. She should have absolutely known that. I knew it. I'm just a warrant officer 5. She's a colonel. And that's where I get to known or should have known. In that position, when she took brigade command, she should have known where her brigade was on the mission lists. All right? She should have known what it took to change that. She should have known all that, and she wasted tax dollars training for a mission we didn't have. And it could have put people at great risk. Was there any kickback on that? I hope so. I didn't follow her career. I hope she didn't make general. But there's in her field, military intelligence, in the Army Reserve, there's only one way you make general, and that's commander of the MERC, and I don't think she was getting it. And so, Paul, anything about the fear factors?
Well, I always, you plan for the worst. And if you're prepared for the worst, then what comes that's not the worst is all good, because you've already prepared for what the worst thing could be. And then, it could actually not be bad at all. And then you could just move on, move through it with experience, competence, and knowledge. And then that's, I always would be ready for 3 things that were coming that could have been the worst. And if none of them came, then you were in a good position there.
That's all true. That's really good advice and everything, but I tend to overthink things, really overthink them. Like, unbelievably overthink them. And I'm always looking at what's the worst that could happen. I'm having nightmares about it sometimes. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Because I've seen the worst happen. It's not good. You know, I don't want that to happen to me. Yet, I have the training, the education, and the experience to kind of tell me that that's not going to happen. That's not the way my brain works. It's called anxiety. You know, there are functional levels of anxiety, and there are dysfunctional levels of anxiety. I feel I'm on the edge. I'm barely functional with my levels of anxiety. So, people that go get, and okay, another shout out here, for any veterans. All right, so you'll hear on some radio channels and everything, and maybe see it on TV, the Road Home program from Rush Hospital. All right, it deals with PTSD issues and everything, and it's free to veterans, or you know, they don't charge. They're funded by nice people that donate the money and everything. So if you're having issues and you're not with the VA, or you're not registered with the VA, you could always call into this Rush Road Home program. Yeah, there we go. And I heard that they might be expanding out to help first responders also, but it also helps with your family. So if your family's having trouble and everything, they do it outpatient. They'll do it through Zoom, so you don't got to go all the way down there. And I understand some people really have anxiety about leaving their house and everything. So if you have access, almost everyone, almost all the cell phones, I'm not saying all of them, almost, all right, always the caveat. If ever I say everything or all right, that's not true. And everyone will jump on me, but what about this? Yes, the 1 in a million chance. You're right. It's not all, because there's 1 in a million. So almost everyone has a cell phone around that's capable. If they don't even have service, you're still capable of hooking into some Wi-Fi to do things through Zoom. All right. And what I'm saying is, if you are somewhat like me and have anxiety issues that are troubling you, and you're a veteran or a family member of a veteran, then this is a good program to check into. If you like veterans and you have deep pockets and you want to donate to something that's worthy, that's very worthy, then I suggest you donate to them. There are some veterans organizations out there, or claiming to be helping veterans, that when you check that, Paul, you were in
Charitable trust. Yeah.
Charitable trust and fraud, right? So what's the minimum that you have to donate, that you have to use out of every dollar you get as a donation?
Well, there's no minimum, but if you hire a professional fundraiser, or you don't use like a certain amount for your program services, you have to have an audit, and it has to be looked into. And you'd be surprised. A lot of those professional fundraisers take 75, 80, 90%. And the charity, they're just happy to get money. That, you know, if the guy makes $10, they might only get 1 or 2. So you always want to, the best thing is to give directly to the charity itself, and check the charity out with both the federal government, make sure that it's an exempt organization, and check it out with your state attorney general.
Yeah, they're not, 501c3 isn't the only exempt organization. They got like the Legion.
There's C5, C6s, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's C19 for the Legion and the VFW and organizations like that. So yeah, you know, not every dollar, if you got to be careful. Some of these, like you see it where the CEOs of these supposedly charitable organizations are making almost $1 million a year.
More some.
And you're like, well, why? You know, is their organization making so much money, right, that if they left that position, that would suddenly stop? That the only reason they're making that is because they're paying this guy? I just think that it's kind of manipulative on that.
Right.
But the Rush Road Home program is awesome and gets 2 thumbs up from me. All right. The other thing that happened, we're getting close. We're getting close to the end here. Yeah, 3 minutes. So, Paul, you know what?
Yeah.
Next week, I was thinking we should talk about significant dates and why dates have significance.
That'd be good.
Yeah, so like you said, April 19th, right, is the start
of the Revolutionary War. That's exactly
Lexington.
why we're here. That's why we're a free country right now.
And then isn't that the same date that they fired on Fort Sumter?
It might be. I have to look that one up.
Dates like that have significance. Yeah.
Yep.
So you got to look at those dates. Now, the day after is Easter, but it's also a significant date for people. Take it. It's just one of the 365 days of the year, but it's the birthday of a certain person.
And there's a date that certain things happened at different times based on that date too.
Yeah, and they're always worried. Oh, this is going to be the next big domestic terrorist attack on this day because of this and everything. It's possible to look into it, you know.
Yeah.